switch gears a little bit and talk about a couple current events, if you may. I don't know if you follow what goes on in the media and hip hop like that. What do you think about what's going on with Diddy right now? And the reason I'm asking you is because you brought up Bill Cosby's publicist on here, Andrew Wyatt, and he pretty much predicted it before it happened. He talked about this being a systematic attack against wealthy black men. How do you feel about that? Bill Cosby's, Diddy's, and people like that, if you may.
I feel that one, I don't know all the details. I do find it crazy that when a person is just accused of doing something wrong, they're automatically treated like they're guilty.
Yep.
Right.
I've always found that problematic. I've always felt that if there's an accusation made, they should be investigated. But a person should still have the presumption of innocence till something is proved. And while I can't say if Puff Daddy or P. Diddy now has done what he's accused of doing or not, I will say, of course, I feel there's always a target on the backs of black people, but especially black men. Whenever they feel we're getting too powerful or they feel we may be a threat to the system, I feel they're always going to try to dig up something on you or make something up. I am not powerful necessarily. I feel like I have a voice and I'm using it to help get the message out there for freemen, my people first and foremost, which is going to help all people. But I've always tell people, don't be surprised if they try to dig something up on me. Now, I don't like Eric Adams in New York City. I can't stand him. I really despise him. I really do. But he spoke against the slow Joe Crow Biden administration because he's like, y'all letting all these illegal immigrants in. What are you doing? Stop this. Look at how quickly things change for him. They're now accusing him of impropriety with finances. And now this sexual assault allegation against him from the early 90s has resurfaced. I'm not saying he's not guilty. What I'm saying is kind of ironic whenever you speak out against the system. And he was somebody who spoke out against us. When the black man was choked to death by two men, the white guy did the choking, but it was some other black guy in there who did the holding of him down, black immigrant guy. When that happened, he tried to blame the black man that was being choked. Okay? So he was speaking on their language.
Yeah.
So he criticized the one time these allegations occurred. I'm not saying that's happening with P. Diddy or anyone, but I do feel that definitely does happen. That definitely happened. Remember, they was trying to frame Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., okay? Trying to frame him several times. I'm not saying any of those men are trying to do what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were trying to do, but I do know in the case with Bill Cosby, he was very much about how we were represented in the media. He was trying to, from what I heard, get ownership of one of the channels, and he was planning on having representation of us that would be positive. I know that on one of his shows, I saw a few reruns of it. It was before I was born, I think. He will, at the end, always talk about black historical figures, such as inventors and things like that. We know they don't want that. Look at the music industry. Speaking of Kanye West, he said that he had sex with a Jewish woman or whatever. They're coming after him, guns are blazing. But some of those same white Jewish execs will have no issues signing an artist who says degrading, disgusting things about black women. So there's definitely a there.
Very powerful interview. The last time we came on, it got a lot of great reviews, a lot of great remarks, man. So we definitely appreciate you coming back on. So how you feeling, man? Still out here doing your thing, still out here fighting a good fight, brother. So how's everything in your world right now?
Everything's been very busy. You know, I am running for office again, and I'm still with the same message that, you know, people are a lot of people, white, any ethnicity, any race, a lot of people are very unhappy with the state of American politics, with the state of the country, and everyone's going to continue to be unhappy because I always say to people, this country will never do right by you until it does right by us. And what you allow this country to do to us, they're eventually going to do it to you. So I'm running on the platform of how it's still repair Black America to save America, but how it's justice for all or it's justice for none. And this country is not going to treat anyone right until they treat all of us right. And Black Americans, freemen first and foremost.
How do you feel about the political system that you're in? Is it tough being a black man in that political system? Are you in South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep, I'm in South Carolina.
Right. How is it just being in that political field? Does it seem like it's more so like they don't want people like us in there, like in politics? Or talk about that a little bit, some of the stuff you've been going through being in politics.
they don't mind having people like us in there if you're tap
Okay.
dancing. If you're tap dancing,
Got you.
if you're selling our people out, they will love to have you. But if you're actually running on a platform such as myself, where you're saying that the black descendants of the people who are enslaved and emancipated by this nation are entitled to reparations, which is direct cash payments, something that has been done for other groups, the intern Japanese Americans, who some of them were dead by the time they were paid reparations in the early 90s. The bill was signed in the late 80s when I was 4 years old, and then it was paid out in the early 90s. The Native Americans who received their settlements, the people who were held hostage by the Iranians, those who were exposed to radiation, the people on the island of Guam, the list of people and groups that have been wronged by this government and yet have been paid or are still being paid reparations is quite a long list. For some reason, everyone wants to make excuses for why freedmen, Black Americans, the descendants of the emancipated, have not yet received it. So because I'm running on a platform that's calling for something that should have been done for us a long time ago, it's been pretty tough. But I tell you what, compared to when I ran the last time to now, a lot more people are talking about reparations. It's really becoming a household topic for whatever reason, whether people are against it or for it.
Well, now I see you're a Democrat. What made you pick a Democratic Party over a Republican Party or like a Libertarian Party? Are you like,
So
yeah, go ahead.
I'm running underneath the Democratic Party, not because I think the Democrats, who a lot of times the leadership, I call them the Democrats, because they're so great. The Democrats and the Republicans. I'm running underneath the Democratic on a Democratic ticket is because that's where 85 to sometimes 90% or more of our people vote. And what happens a lot, people say, why don't you run as a Republican? Well, they don't do right by us either. But the difference is 90% of us who vote are not voting for the Republicans. We're voting for the Democrats. So I always give the analogy. Right now, Black Americans, we've lost 90% of our land. We own less homes now than we did during the days of Jim Crow. Our wealth is actually heading backwards. In 2017, they said by 2053, we will be at 0% wealth. That was before COVID. That shuttered over half of Black-owned businesses. So we might already be there. I could go on with all of the devastating statistics that showed the condition in which we are in, which some of us are in denial about. I don't get why. We have been voting for the Democrats for the past 60 years. I always say, if I go to McDonald's or Wendy's, I get a burger from Wendy's and the burger's undercooked, I'm not going to run across the street to McDonald's. I'm going to go right back to Wendy's and say, hey, my burger's undercooked. I spent my money with you and you owe me a product that is of high quality. So I'm running as a Democrat because too often we don't hold them accountable. They get our votes. The math's already been done. Without the Black vote, the Democrats would cease to exist. If they just lost 15 to 20% of the Black vote, they will cease to exist. And yet, where are they being held accountable for the despicable conditions in which they're in? So I said to myself, I'm going to hold them accountable, not from the outside throwing rocks at the window. We do that a lot as Black people in this country. We like to protest. We like to have poster boards. We always protest from the outside. No, run for office and hold them accountable from the inside. I'm sitting at the dinner table, letting y'all know you failed us, and that's going to stop today.
We often have a conversation amongst our community on why we don't mess with politics, why we don't trust the people that are running for office in whatever situation we're dealing, whether it be president, whether it be our local government, whatever the case may be. You're on here blatantly putting it out. This is what we're trying to do for our people. I'm not playing around. I'm not BSing. This is what we're trying to do. What's the temperature and what's the reception been like in your community towards our people when it comes to your political campaign and your race? How have you been received amongst the people who genuinely want to see change the way you're trying to provide it?
The majority of our people with whom I speak, it's extremely rare that any of them are against any of the things I am mentioning. And this might surprise y'all. I'm in South Carolina, which has a lot of white conservatives who are very, very conservative. Here's the thing. A lot of Black people are very conservative. Just because, first of all, we have to stop thinking that most Black voters are voting for the Democrats. Those who actually show up and vote for the Democrats. But over 50% of registered black voters don't show up to vote. It's the same thing with white voters and other groups in this country. But there are eligible black people in America who do not register to vote at all. And yet, when I present my platform, my people, our people, are usually for what I am trying to do. And
Right.
this might seem surprising. Even a lot of white people are for what I'm trying to do. But I speak about reparations, but there's another topic about which I speak that I don't want people to forget. I also say to our people, you don't trust politicians? Good. Don't trust them. People say to me, well, how do I know if I vote for you, you won't get in office and screw us over? You are not supposed to trust me. You are supposed to say to me, I'm going to hold you accountable. Us trusting politicians is partially the reason why we're in the mess we're in. You do not trust a politician. You say to that politician, if you get in office and you don't do what you promise, I'm going to be right there, pitchfork and torch in hand, to hold you accountable. You do not trust them. You hold them accountable. I've also been saying to our people, if you do not see anyone running for office that's worthy of your vote, or the people in office are not worthy of your vote and they failed you, then the answer is not to withdraw from the system, but to participate even more and take over the system. And that's why I ran for office. I don't trust you and I don't like you. You failed us. So instead of me saying, if a candidate doesn't have policies for me, I'm just not going to vote, I'm going to run for office and become the candidate that has policies, first and foremost, for my people, freedmen, not only for us, but definitely specifically for us with other policies that I have as well.
Right now, California is, if I'm not mistaken, the first state to actually tackle reparations for blacks. Do you know anything about that, and how, what's your agenda if you able to get in office, kind of following suit with California is trying to do?
So I've actually been fortunate enough to help support the initiative with the people who have really been the tip of the spear with the reparations initiative in California. I've supported very much, and they're doing it the right way. Reparations is not a race-based matter. That's something we have to get out of. Reparation is something that's done based on status. When the Japanese Americans who were interned were paid reparations, they did not give it to all Asian people. They didn't even give it to all Japanese people. It was only those who were of this status that were formerly interned in the concentration camps or their descendants. Likewise, reparations does not go to all black people. It only goes to freemen. That's why you hear me using those terms. The freeman status is the political status of those who were formerly enslaved and their black descendants, because all reparations has been paid out based on status. There is no such thing as Native American reparations. However, Native American tribes, depending on whether they are Choctaw, whether they are Cherokee, they get various settlements based on the status, which is their tribal designation. It's the same thing with those who were exposed to radiation in the 90s, and they're still getting reparations today. So Joe Biden just renewed the radiation Exposure Compensation Act. It's not done because they were living in the states where America was doing nuclear testing. They are the people who were exposed to the radiation, or in the case that they're dead, their descendants can collect reparations. California followed that model, and because they followed that model, it was able to be held up to and pass constitutional scrutiny. The one thing with California, though, that even the people who are pushing for it, groups like NAASD will tell you, is that the states really can't do reparations the way that needs to be done. Ultimately, reparations is a matter by the federal government. I'm in South Carolina, a state with an extremely, probably one of the ugliest histories of anti-black hate. And yet, there's no way that South Carolina can afford to pay us what we are owed. And people like to say, well, some states didn't have Jim Crow, some states didn't have slavery. If one state had it, it's the same as all states having it, because South Carolina was only able to do the ugly things it did because the federal government allowed them to do it. The federal government initiated the Fugitive Slave Act. The federal government either initiated or sanctioned chattel slavery, Jim Crow, redlining. The Federal Housing Authority put highways and railroads through black neighborhoods and towns. even destroying some of our black Wall Streets. The federal government failed to protect us from sharecropping and racial massacres. So ultimately, I support what California is doing. There are some other states trying to do some reparations initiative. Some of them are just scams. It's a whole other conversation, though. But ultimately, reparations is a responsibility of the federal government. They had the responsibility to protect us, and they fail. But they also have the resources to truly pay us what we are owed.
How do you feel? My bad.
You go, bro.
About the country sending a lot of foreign aid to Ukraine and a lot of different places for all these different wars. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a slap in the face. But that right there shows, first of all, I've been to, I want to call them MAGA rallies because they don't like being referred to in that particular term. But I've been to a lot of, really, they were MAGA rallies of people who were diehard, self-identified as MAGA. I've spoken with them. Now, if there's any person you think will have tomatoes and hammers thrown at them, going up there talking about the freedmen, this, Black American, this, is me. I've gotten standing ovations from them, okay? We need to understand that the bigots who are often put on the news and often have the biggest platforms don't necessarily represent the people. And one thing I always say to them, because some of them, not all of them are against reparations because they're just bigots. Some of them are against reparations because some of them are truly what you want to call fiscally conservative. There are even some black people who have said to me, we deserve it, but it'll bankrupt the country. However, what I say to them, then where's that same energy for the hundreds of billions, now going into the trillions of dollars we spend on Ukraine? This war in Israel now, okay? That's not even including the money we spent on taking care of illegal immigrants. One report by the Washington Post, which is pretty liberal, very left-leaning, said that the federal government was spending $69 million a week just caring for minors in the country illegally, not including the adults. The slow Joe Crow Biden administration has had 10 million border crossings, okay? And they said just housing alone, we are paying American citizens around $300 billion in wealth. That right there could have been a significant payment of our reparations. What people don't tell you, a lot of these foreign countries hate us. A lot of immigrants, legal and illegal, they send about 15 to 30%, depending on which study you read, 15 to 30% of their wealth they send back to their countries. Freedmen, Black Americans who are descendants of those emancipated by the U.S. We are American citizens first and foremost. America is our home. You give a Black American citizen $1, we will make $10 from it. So what I say to these white patriots, especially the ones who are really just bigots, I can tell, where's all this energy stopping them from flooding our borders, taking care of these illegal immigrants, bailing out these corporations? The Obama administration alone spent $29 trillion bailing out just the banks. We are being told that they don't have the money, and yet we're being showed every day they absolutely do. The real issue is what it's always been: anti-Black American hate.
And that's what I was about to just get to. What do you think the ultimate reasoning is? Because they give you the excuse of it'll bankrupt the country, but we see that that's a direct contradiction of everything they're doing. We hear a bunch of stuff, and then obviously, nothing's happening. Nothing. So why? Why do you think the ultimate reason is that America is so afraid to give Black freedmen in this country reparation that they deserve?
It's the same thing why after the Civil War, they didn't punish the Confederates by executing them like some white Republicans. At that time, the Republican Party was the party for freedmen. The Republican Party, and the funny thing is, the Republican Party, if you look at the history, it's the Republican Party that has historically been the reparations party. The Republican Party calls themselves the party of Abraham Lincoln, yet Abraham Lincoln, the last thing he did was Special Field Order 15, was supposed to give us our 40 acres and a mule. You can't call yourself the party of Lincoln, yet you're not following in his footsteps. But it's always this belief that we as freedmen, as Black Americans, we should be happy that we're in the United States of America. No, the United States of America should be damn happy that we are in the United States of America, because there would be no United States of America without us. Abraham Lincoln said, if not for the freedmen, the Union would have fallen. So not only have we built the nation, we've saved it, and we fought for it time and time again. Yeah. Black inventors is one of my favorite things. Right now, we're using Skype, voice over internet, StreamYard, voice over internet protocol. A Black American woman invented this technology where we're able to speak to each other over the internet. I can go on, but there is some other reasons outside of anti-Black American hate. The second part is we haven't demanded it. Too many of us, and I'm aiming some criticism at us, too many of us get more into, tabloid fodder, pop culture. We need to be demanding what we're owed, not asking for it. We need to be demanding what we're owed. And we need to be running as candidates for office, not simply being angry with the people in office or the people running for office, saying, hell with them. We are going to be the ones running for office. Even if we lose, which I lost, I shouldn't have even gotten more than 1% of the vote. How I got close to 5%, I have no idea how. A teacher, small town teacher, never ran, only had 6 months when I joined the race, hardly did any canvassing on the ground because I was working most of the time. How I got that much higher percentage, I have no idea. But the fact is, when I first started, I had one supporter. Now I have thousands of them. More people, and I'm not saying it's only a credit to me, but more people are now talking about reparations and seeing how it will benefit the nation far more than what happened when I started. Imagine if all of us were doing that throughout the nation. Just the fact of us running for office alone will scare those in office to realize that we are waking up and they better do something. So we have to also be demanding more. We have to be running for office to be the candidates we should have always had and that we deserve.
Now, as far as reparations, what does it look like? Is it money? Would it be land? And if they put you in charge of it, what would it look like for the Freemans to get reparation from the government?
Well, it will be all of the above. I have a plan on my website, marcellforcongress.com, and it is called a better deal for Black America. And it will be cash payments. Direct cash payments is essential. But let me be very clear, because this is where people get confused. There's around 50 to 55 million of us in this country. I don't know why we hold on to that 40 million or something. The census undercounts us. But even at the undercount, there's like 50 to 55 million of us. Of that number, around 49 to 50 million are freemen, meaning Black Americans who are descendants of those emancipated by the U.S. My plan will call for us to get at least $3 million per person. Now, this is a living, breathing document, so I'm always going back and I'm always revising. But we will not get it right away in dollars. We will get it in cash bonds, okay? And cash bonds are really just yellow dollars. I'm not an economist. I had to learn this stuff myself. And what cash bonds do is you get paid interest. It's almost like the government saying, I owe you and I will pay you. Guess what? When people talk about the debt, Donald Trump did an interview one time. He was like, I love debt. He was like, I made a lot of money just from debt. He's telling the truth. That's how a lot of people make a lot of wealth. Foreign countries, they buy American bonds. If the American government lends money, okay, and they don't necessarily cover it with taxes, which the American government does not need, but the American government allows people to buy their debt, which are yellow dollars, and then they pay people interest on that debt until it matures, meaning they replace all of the yellow dollars with green dollars. So my plan will call for us right away to get $3 million in cash bonds. We will get paid interest on it, and it will take about 14 to 15 years for us to get our full $3 million. My plan will also bring back the Freedmen's Bureau. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, the federal government set up the Freedmen's Bureau that was first and foremost to serve freedmen. That's why that status is so important, because the government's already done policies for us underneath the status as freemen. I will bring back the Freedmen's Bureau, who will oversee a land grant program, and what I call my Black Wall Street initiative will be the Black Business Program, because this country destroyed our Black Wall Streets, that if they were not destroyed, those blocks, those neighborhoods in the cities would have been major metropolises today. 90% of our land was stolen, and we're still losing it. South Carolina, especially here where I am in the coast, is ground zero for land theft. I want to get us back to the South, because if we could become the majority in states where we are already 30% or higher, that's Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, which we're close, South Carolina, Georgia, Maryland, If we can get the majority, we can easily elect people, whether they're black or not. It may be a blue person, it may be a white person, who will serve our interests first and foremost. I want to get us back to the South and get us back to farming so we can feed ourselves. So that will be a part of the land grant program. You wouldn't have to farm, but you will get land, and most of it will be in the states where most of us were enslaved. Those are just the gist of my Better Deal for Black American plan. Black America plan. Oh, and I want to say real quick, the Freedmen's Bureau will be staffed by us. Just like the Native Americans have the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and it's staffed by all Native Americans, even though a lot of those Native Americans aren't the original ones. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
The Freedmen's Bureau will be staffed by freedmen only, and it will not be under the federal government. The federal government will give us a budget, like they give these Native American tribes a budget, but we will have autonomy in how that money is spent, so we can be responsive to our needs.
Well said. Now, one of the biggest propaganda pushes that they have, that politicians have, in particular in Black America, is peddling out a lot of hip hop artists, a lot of entertainers, to manipulate, to encourage us to vote a certain way without a lot of knowledge, just more so on a popularity based conversation. Hey, vote for XYZ because we like them. 9 times out of 10, we don't do much research. We vote for XYZ because we were told to by them. Now, this conversation of reparations has been happening very heavily the last few years. So it's not going past the celebrities that are being influenced to talk very certain ways. Why do you think that hip hop, why do you think that people in our culture in the mainstream run away from this conversation knowing it's something that's owed to us?
We've always, like Jackie Robinson, during the days of Malcolm X and those, he would actually speak against the movement for us to get justice in some respects, okay? It's not new. Some of our people, it's almost like that thing where a lot of celebrities become big just with their Black support alone. But then when they go mainstream, they start feeling like, okay, I want to have crossover appeal. I want to reach out to whites. I want to reach out to Asians. So the first thing they do is try to throw us under the bus. I hate to say it, but I even feel Tyler Perry does that sometimes. You became a multi-millionaire off your Black support alone. And yet, when that thing happened with Kyrie Irving, where they accused him of being anti-Semitic because he posted a link to a movie video, Tyler Perry jumps up there talking about somehow he's been friends with white Jews, all his, like, so unnecessary. Right. It's always that thing where we feel we have to throw our own people under the bus in order to curry favor with other people. I want favor with other people, but I'm not going to do it if I have to throw my people under the bus. I don't have to rock with everyone. I don't even rock with a lot of my own people. I think, like you said, though, it is a serious, one of it is a lack of values, but another issue is a lack of education. Yeah. But I will say that's starting to change. Cat Williams was doing a show, and he was like, hey, it's time to pay Black people reparations. Now, some of his talking points were a little off. Reparations is not to stop racism. Racism is going to still continue even after reparations long paid. Reparations is just about a debt that this nation owes to the Black descendants of those 4.5 million people who were emancipated and were supposed to be repaired during Reconstruction. But instead of that happening, the federal government terrorized them for another 100 years, depriving them of the little bit of wealth they were able to accumulate and locking them out of wealth that was generated by programs that they freely did for white Americans and other groups, from the Homestead Act to the GI Bill, the Social Security Act. So I do think there's a lack of education. And I also do feel that there is the desire for people to want to be accepted by others. And what is the quickest way to be shunned by other groups, even sometimes our own, is to speak up specifically and unapologetically for us. I see it all the time.
Yeah, powerful. Now, as far as you talk about the Freemen, but how will we, because they always say, well, the records was destroyed, we don't really have, proof that, how will we find out if we were like descendants of slaves? What system would be in place for you, whoever was in charge, to find out who's actual descendants that should actually get the reparations?
Well, when people say it, that's BS. But following the footsteps of California, they do have a part that will have genealogy services to help people trace their lineage. But here's the truth. Most freemen, we know our lineage. We know our history. I might be a special case. When I was born, my great great-grandparents were still living. They died when I was like 9 to 11, but they were still living. Those people were born in the 1880s, and they were still alive when I was born. My father was raised by his great-grandparents, Mr. Powell and Miss Irene. Mr. Powell was born in the late 1890s. Miss Irene was born in 1900. They died in the 1970s and the 1980s, respectively. My great-grandmother, my dear Nan, I did a commercial about her. She was born in 1914. She was raised by her grandparents. Her grandfather, Willie Simmons, who was enslaved right here in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Wow.
A lot of Black Americans have similar stories. Just a few generations ago, a lot of our grandparents and great-grandparents literally were growing up around the majority of people who were formerly enslaved. But you have census records. You have records for the Freedmen's Bureau. Okay? You have land deeds. You have pensions. There are plenty of ways to track our ancestors who were formerly enslaved. But I don't want to discount those who say they have had a hard time. For those people, we will have genealogy services. And no matter who, if a person comes up and claims that they are a freeman, a Black descendant of those who were emancipated by the U.S., we are going to have to vet their paperwork. Everyone's going to get vetted because we already see you have like Rachel Dolezal and people like that. But we even have a lot of Black immigrants. Reparations cannot be done based on race. If we do it based on race, it won't happen at all. It will be struck down as unconstitutional. It has the precedent for reparations is based on status. So this is not anti-immigrant. If people want to take it that way, tough. But even a Black person that shows up and says that, hey, I'm a freeman, we're going to have to vet them. Because just because you have a Black face, you might be my color, but I don't mean you're my kind. And in the case of reparations, it has to be for my kind. You have to be of that status freeman. So we're going to have genealogy services, but everyone's claim is going to be vetted to make sure that we are upholding the qualification of you having that status of American freedman.
Now, another conversation that comes up in pop culture and likes to kind of go against us receiving reparations is, all right, you Negroes ain't going to do nothing but reparations, but buy gold Cuban link chains and cars and blase, blah. You're not going to do nothing but waste it anyway. And it's really nobody's business how it's spent, but that's the conversation that's had when brought up with reparations, particularly with our people. In a perfect world, how would you like to see reparations used in our culture if received?
Well, first, may I address that?
Yes, sir.
Even if we do waste the money, it's our money. Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
This is not a shot at white Americans, but look at these corporations that show up every damn year and asking the federal government to give them trillions of dollars to bail them out. Most of those corporations are ran by privileged, rich white men and white women. No one ever gets to know about what are you doing with these billions of dollars the government is giving you. The airlines are back in front of Congress asking for more money. And the federal government is literally saying to them, what did you do with all this money we gave you? The Pentagon has failed its 6th audit. They cannot account for $90 to $21 trillion. No one is saying to them, we should not give you more money. You have rich white people who are leaving billions, millions, and billions of dollars to their pet poodle. No one criticizes them. But if you look at history, Black Americans have been the most frugal. Right now, as we speak, all studies show that Black Americans save more than any other group, even though we have the least amount of wealth. When Trump did the stimulus checks, this is a study, you can look it up. Black Americans started more new businesses than any other group. That is verified, okay? Show me another group that came to America or that built America, which is just us, but show me another group in America that was being terrorized day in and day out, had no protection, but we built not just one Black Wall Street, but over 50 of them by some counts. That shows that we are and continue to be the most frugal with our money. But even if we were not, I get my paycheck. No one can tell me how to spend it. It's my right to do it. Yes. However, I would like to see us use our reparations to get ownership, to start our own industries. The truth of the matter is there are some industries that would not be in existence without us, okay? Mm-hmm. And we need to have ownership in those industries, and we need to do that by starting our own enterprises. I would like to see us go back to buying land. We rent far too much. That's an American issue, but with Black Americans, we are overrepresented in those who are renting. And it's pushing us into a system of sharecropping where we're selling grandmother's house or we're being forced to sell it, or we feel like we have no option to sell but grandmother's house, and then we're renting. The problem with renting is that the people who are over you, your landlord, they tell you this is what you're going to pay. It's going to go up next year, and more of your hard-earned money is going to them. Just like with sharecropping, we did the work, but most of what we harvested, what we cultivated, what we harvested, went to the landowner. I want us to go back to having land ownership. I want us, this is what my Freedmen's Bureau is going to do. It's going to have Freedmen banks, Freedmen schools, Freedmen hospitals, Freedmen post offices. But I would like to see us bring our Black Wall Streets back as well. Those things happen organically. I want to see those return also. And in being for Black American freedom doesn't mean we're excluding others, but it means we're going to be first and foremost for ourselves, which every other group does.
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about like the fact that we really can't, in certain instances, come together for anything? Like you see, like you talked about Kyrie, even Kanye West. He had a he said he after Jewish B, but the ADL is coming after, everybody's coming after him. But when it comes to Black people, we can't stick together like that. Why do you think that is in America? For any little thing, we really can't come together and form that fist, to come together.
Well, I think we do stick together pretty well, because if we have not, we would not be here. The truth of the matter is we would have been annihilated a long time ago. Freedmen, Black Americans, I'm not talking about Black immigrants. We're really non-tribalistic, and that's actually our weakness. We are so welcoming of others. So that kind of answers your question. One of the reasons that we don't come together on a larger scale, I will make the argument that's the issue. We come together, but we don't get that groundswell, that mass we need, is because we welcome too many others in our midst. We even like to welcome people who hate us. You look at someone who slaughters a bunch of Black Americans, the next day, while the bodies of their loved ones are still warm, we up there saying we forgive them. We welcome too many people in our midst who hate us, even people who look like us. We've always had to deal with the coons, always. But now we have the tethers, the Black immigrants who are against us, and we're welcoming them in our midst because they're Black. Now that's starting to change some. So one of the reasons that we don't come together on a larger scale is because we allow infiltrators in our midst. But that is done strategically. There is no other group that has been targeted in that way besides us. These groups, the NAASP, the National Action Network, the Urban League, instead of them speaking for us, which they're supposed to do, they go out their way to speak for everyone else. They pretty much make themselves a people of color group instead of making themselves a Black, and first and foremost, a Black American, aka freedmen group. So these other groups, like the Anti-Defamation League, they stand on being first and foremost for Jewish people, really white Jewish people. Because if they really gave a damn about Jewish people, they would say something about the way Israel treats Black Jews from Uganda, Sudan, and Ethiopia. They say nothing about that, or they say little in comparison to what they say about anti-Semitism when they feel it is directed towards white Jews. Those groups stand on and unapologetically advocate for the group that is their focus. We have these groups that do not do that. So that's why I go back to what I'm saying. We have to become the candidates we deserve. We have to become the politicians we deserve. And we have to form the groups that are going to speak for us and speak out against those who are against us that we deserve as well. Because we can't rely on them because they're not going to do it.